Hey everybody, we are back once again, Friday nights here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. We are exhuming the X-Files. My name is Matthew. Joining me tonight, as always, is Jeremy.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing okay. We have gotten over, 3 awesome episodes of the X-Files thus far. So I'm like, damn! Like, when is this show gonna miss? Is it gonna miss? How are we gonna play this going forward? What are we getting? I have no idea what we're getting into in episode 4. Fire it up! We're talking Conduit, directed by Daniel Sackheim and written by Alex Ganza and Howard Gordon. So just like James Wong and Glenn Morgan, Alex Ganza and Howard Gordon are also going to become a tandem of writers that write many, many sort of classic X-Files episodes down the road. This is their first attempt. We got Conduit, air date October 1st, 1993, taking place close to our home, Sioux City, Iowa. I mean, we're getting closer. I don't know. Do they ever go to Nebraska in the X-Files? Do you ever remember a Nebraska-based episode?
Wasn't the weird Amish people who filled the basement full of clay in Nebraska?
I don't know.
I can't remember. I think so. But
Okay. Well, hopefully they come to Nebraska. That'll be a fun episode when we get there. But we're one state over, Sioux City, Iowa. We are back to aliens, friend. So, what is Conduit all about?
starts out with some people camping next to a lake and a bunch of bright light, and then all of a sudden the daughter is gone, and
Yeah.
she gets abducted, and we gotta figure out where she went.
Very reminiscent of what Mulder said happened to his sister. You know, not necessarily like she was outside and the aliens took her away, but a sister of this boy who kind of gets abducted, and that's gonna be kind of like the through line of this episode is Mulder's sort of obsession with helping this family find their missing sister because he missed, his sister is missing, so to speak. Um, Daniel Sackheim actually returns as director. He actually directed episode 2, Deep Throat, and he would actually come back next season to direct one of the most famous Monster of the Week episodes and one of my personal favorites of all the X Files episodes, The Host, which is the one with the Fluke Man in the
Oh
sewer,
yeah.
which I love. I actually, I actually have the action figure of the Fluke Man. It's one of my prized toys. I love that. So yeah, this episode, I'm not going to call it a miss necessarily, but I feel like this is probably the episode that of the 4 that we have watched, the first 4, this is probably my least favorite. Where do you kind of stand on Conduit?
I remember it when I was a kid as being the one episode that solidified the show for me, but
Okay.
just because I was always a big fan of Poltergeist, so the kid getting talked to through the TV, the
Oh yeah.
binary stuff, the NSA showing up and just saying, where the, is this kid getting all of this secret information from? And then the big reveal at the end with the, well, we'll get there, but I, I always really, really enjoyed this because very much like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it's specifically about abduction and all of the crazy shit that goes through it, but what the families go through when they're missing out
Yeah.
on, and what happened and all of that.
Yeah,
I
we
like it.
shouted out Weekly World News on a previous episode, and one of the hooks of this episode is the FBI. I think this is the one where they're questioning why Mulder wants to go to Iowa, or he's trying to get funds to go to Iowa, and it's because it's essentially Weekly World News. He reads a story about the abduction in the Weekly World News, and that's how he decides to go. So this is again one of those things where UFOs and aliens in the early 1990s, it was everywhere, man. It was ubiquitous. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing something involving aliens, and I like that the writers sort of pulled that in. And I like the fact that Mulder is, looking at the Weekly World News because guess what? I love the Weekly World News. I would get my mom to buy me one so I could go like Bat Boy and shit like that. I loved reading those ridiculous, crazy stories. And to me, I just identified with Mulder even more because I'm like, this guy's reading the Weekly World News like I am. It's fucking great.
I think
I
even
love it.
later on, the Men in Black movie didn't one of the two characters like,
Yes.
we got to go pick up the hot sheets, and he just starts
Yes.
picking up like the National Enquirer, Weekly World. Like, you're
Yep.
reading this bullshit. It's like the only accurate news that's out anymore.
Yes, exactly. Like they just make the. I think I still have some Weekly World Newses. Also, like I think I still have the Bat Boy one. Like I love that stuff. I love that stuff. Yeah. And so this one, Mulder. I don't remember exactly how they got the funds to go take this case. I know that Scully tells Blevins like, "Well, let me go talk to him and figure it out." And he kind of connects it to previous disappearances in that town, right? Like he's like, "This is part of an X file." Like uh, three or four other people have disappeared from Lake Okiboji. Is that what it was? And
Okaboji. Yep.
yeah, and that's how he sort of gets the FBI to sort of, I guess pay for this trip, which is one of the funny things about the X Files going forward is uh, that the government could just stop him from doing any of this stuff at any time. Like they always have to come up with some sort of reason as to how Mulder can continue working on stuff. Now, at a certain point, they do close the X Files. They shut him down entirely, and that's a whole season storyline arc. But I love these early episodes where they feel like they have to try to explain to the audience. Well, they're going to question why the FBI is letting him go to Iowa based on a Weekly World News article. Let's tie it this way. I just think that's kind of funny
Or
myself.
sometimes they'll just bring in Deep Throat, and he'll just say, because it had to
Yeah.
happen this way.
Yes.
Cop out.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, Mulder and them, Mulder and Scully, they head to Sioux City, Iowa. They start talking to this lady, who's like the mother, and she's sort of explaining what happened and all of that. And then you're kind of introduced to the young kid who does he speak at all in this episode? I don't really remember.
Oh yeah,
Maybe he says something.
when he reaches, or he Mulder leaves the table with the mom and leaves Scully there, and then goes over
Oh
and starts
yeah,
talking to the kid in front of the television's like, what are you doing?
yeah, you're right.
He's
Because
telling
I
me
couldn't
something
remember.
there.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, I because for whatever reason in my mind I was thinking he was just kind of mute and he was pointing at the TV. But you're right. He does kind of talk to him there. So yeah, and then it's just kind of like this obsession thing with Mulder. This episode is entirely about obsession. Like Mulder will not let go of the fact that they are trying to find this missing girl, and Scully's trying to like pull him back. It's like we can't be here. There's no body. There's no case here for us. We can't stay here in Sioux City, Iowa, forever. And Mulder has a big moment where he's like, "I'm not giving up on this missing girl. Like you can go back, but I won't do it." And Scully has that moment where she's like, "Stop looking for your sister." And that's kind of like the moment of the episode where Mulder kind of turns around and he's just like, you go, I'm staying, whatever you do. And but Scully stays because we're establishing that relationship between the both of them. Um, this episode, yeah, I mean, what's this is the episode that stands out to me the least. Like I'm struggling to remember like a lot of the stuff in this. There's a great sequence right where with the binary numbers and all the papers on the floor, and Scully goes up the stairs and looks down, and Mulder comes up, and it's the sister, the face of the sister, which funnily enough, that was actually done by hand by the production crew. They actually did that by hand, which was crazy.
I
Um,
remember being a kid and seeing that scene. I'm like, oh my god, that's the coolest thing ever. And then I just
yeah,
watched it. When I watched it, I'm like, wow, that really doesn't look like that girl
yeah.
at all.
I mean, it's impressive they did all that by hand and kind of drew it like that. That's cool. But yeah, so you really like this episode. So I'm going to kind of toss this over to you. What are the things that you really enjoyed about this particular episode?
The starting at the beginning during the abduction piece when the mom burned her hand really bad and then puts her hand in the oven mitt, them later on finding the glass, finding the torched trees and stuff like that, like they're finding actual evidence, something that Scully she never sees
Yeah.
a UFO, but trying to showing her evidence and saying, you explain this away in a
Like
way that
the
makes sense.
glass, the sand on the beach that is turned to glass.
Yeah. And then when they're talking about the kid and the binary and like, okay, there's pieces of Shakespeare, there's music, there's DNA strands, like
Yeah.
things that a kid should not know. I kind of liked that angle of it a lot. And
Like
then
the NSA shows up and they're like roughing up Mulder and stuff. Like, where'd you get this? He's like, it's just ones and zeros, man. It turns out it's like crazy shit the NSA is trying to. I love Scully in there. Like, they're the NSA. They can do anything.
yeah, he was kind of jumping her case about like just
Yeah.
barking.
Yeah.
Like you
Why'd you
shouldn't have
tell
said
them,
that.
Scully? Like, what the fuck did you say that for? They're the NSA, Mulder. I can't say no to the NSA.
And then they tossed that little kid's room, just
Oh,
yanking
yeah.
all his drawings off the wall. That's so insensitive. Poor kid. Threw him in a car, in the back of a car, all by himself. Like, ugh.
Yeah, there is one funny thing in this episode that I literally it wasn't intended to be funny, but I laughed out loud. um, I have a shield and a badge with my job, and when Mulder goes up to the bartender and he's trying to get information about this guy, and the guy's like, "Oh, I need to see your ID or whatever," he holds up. That is the if you pause it, that is the stupidest, cheapest looking like shield slash badge I have ever seen in my life. It doesn't look real at all. Whoever the production designer was, they need to give Mulder a better shield because that looked awful. It took me out of the entire episode, man. It's all I could think about. It's like that looks like some little kindergartner put together this little plastic shield. I mean,
How we didn't know what FBI badges looked
I
like
know,
way back then.
but I know. It drove me crazy now as an adult. But yeah, I think that's cool. I like the scene. Like, I guess for me, there are moments, there are things in this episode I really, really like. But then there are lots of things in this episode that I don't. It's not like I don't like them. I just wasn't interested. Maybe coming off seeing the first three episodes, this one kind of felt like it was slowing way down. Like we're not getting the kind of the monsters that I was looking for, or we're getting alien sort of stuff, but I'm kind of like I kind of feel like we covered some of this stuff in the first two episodes already. And I know it's mostly about Mulder's drive, right? The obsession about the sister, but I didn't. I felt like the scene where Mulder is interrogating that girl, where he's playing bad cop, like he's just coming at her really hard. I felt that was out of character for him, and I think maybe that's because they're trying to establish, hey, he's just he's so obsessed about this, and that he needs to find this girl. I just didn't feel like it. They pulled it off as well as they could have. But one thing I really do like about this is I like the end of this episode a lot. I think it's an amazing ending where Scully's kind of listening to Mulder's hypnosis sessions about his missing sister. And you see it's cross-cut with Mulder in the church, which we don't ever see him in a church very often in this show. He's been established as like the he's not really into that. Scully is established as the she believes in God, and they established that in later episodes going forward. But it you get that moment where Mulder's talking to the therapist, and he's sort of crosscut crying in the church, and I think the therapist says something like, "Do you think she's okay or something?" And he just says, "I want to believe." In this really sort of sad way. And I'm like, it's such a great ending to it. But I felt like tonally, there was a lot in this episode that was just kind of like up and down and didn't feel like it completely connected with what the first three episodes were doing.
I think they probably are the weird finding the body in the woods and that other girl thing. Like I don't know why that was in the
Yeah, like
episode,
the
but
girl in the library who was pregnant and all of that.
that. But as far as like Mulder interrogating that girl, it felt in that scene like he was just trying to get the actual answer, and he was just assuming that this girl had killed her friend and this dude. He
Yeah.
was just letting the story go at that point. He's like, I'm pissed off that I came all this way just to find out that you just murdered these people in a jealous rage.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I don't know. Something about it just didn't work. And maybe if I had seen Mulder in one of the three previous episodes act like that in some way, but it just seemed to come out of nowhere. It just seemed to me, it was like, this is so out of character for what we've already established for him. Um, but yeah, it didn't really work for me. I'm trying to think. Like, I don't have a ton of notes or comments on this. There wasn't a whole lot of facts about this episode that I could find. Is there anything else that you really wanted to touch base with on this episode? I mean, this episode of Exhuming the X Files might not be super long, but what else was in this that you want to discuss?
I mean, the pictures of the UFOs over the years, those were kind of cool. Like,
Yeah,
I've always enjoyed that stuff, and it was a little bit better than the triangle ones. But
yeah.
the scene where the kid's running off, and all of a sudden the light starts coming brighter and brighter, and then it just subverts your expectations. Just a bunch of bikers driving around the
Oh
lake, as they
yeah,
mentioned earlier in the episode. I thought that was a really cool scene.
yeah. And Mulder saves the kid too.
Yeah,
Like, he actually saves the life of this kid, which cool. The bartender biker guy when he kind of, I've seen that guy before in something. I couldn't quite place him, but I know I've seen him before. I like when he pulls the his hair back and his ears all gnarled, and he's like, "Get yourself a sunburn in the middle of the night,
right.
man."
Like, ride with me sometime, brother.
Yeah. So there are definitely some things in this episode that I really enjoy. But man, like, I this was the most recent one I just watched, and I feel like I've forgotten most of it. And I feel like that's kind of an indictment on it for me personally. Conduit, just not one that I'm super into. Though I do feel, I could be wrong, and in the 90s they used to, when they released these out on VHS, they used to have them on like 2 episodes on a VHS. And I feel like the pilot episode and Conduit were on the same VHS. I might be wrong about that, but I feel like I had Conduit on VHS at some point, and that was always one I would just never watch. So I had a whole bunch of VHSs of different episodes, and I get to Conduit and be like, nah, I'm done. So never been a huge fan of this one. Didn't sort of sell me totally on this rewatch, but still some good stuff in it.
For sure.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. All these episodes will be different, varying lengths. Sometimes we'll talk in depth, and that's something we really loved, and sometimes there's not a whole lot to say about them, because not every episode can be amazing of any of these shows, especially one that goes on for like 11 seasons, which is wild. But next week, folks, we're going to be back with another Monster of the Week episode. We are going to be talking the Jersey Devil. And I remember really liking this episode. So, do you remember anything about the Jersey Devil episode?
I do.
Okay, so I'm excited to discuss it. I remember liking it, but I don't remember a whole lot. And that's one of the things about revisiting all of these shows. I have vivid memories of many episodes, but going plot by plot, like what actually happened for 45 minutes and all these, long gone out of my mind. So looking forward to seeing the Jersey Devil next Friday. So hit that like and subscribe, and we will be back next week with another episode of Exhuming the X-Files. Catch you later.